3 men, 1 victim, and a decision that would cost him everything he'd ever worked for. The alley is dark, lit only by a flickering streetlight that seems to pulse with every scream. The sound of fists meeting flesh echoes off brick walls while a black SUV idles at the corner, engine rumbling like a warning. Cars pass on the main road just 20 feet away. Headlights sweep across the violence and keep moving. A woman walking her dog crosses to the other side of the street, eyes fixed firmly ahead. Everyone sees. No one stops. Because this is the kind of neighborhood where survival means minding your own business, where getting involved is how you become the next victim, where witnesses have a funny way of disappearing before they can testify. But he stops. A young man, mid-20s, freezes on the sidewalk with white earbuds still dangling from his collar. His worn leather messenger bag is slung across his chest, stuffed with papers he's been reviewing for hours, papers that represent everything: his future, his family's hope, his one shot at escaping the life that's been crushing him since the day he was born. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp, he has the most important interview of his entire life. The kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice, the kind that changes bloodlines. For a moment, he just stands there, 50 feet from the chaos, his mind doing the math. It's 9:45. He needs sleep. He needs to press his suit. He needs to review his notes one more time. Getting involved means police reports, statements, hospitals, hours of his night evaporating. He knows how this works. He's lived in neighborhoods like this his entire life. Seen what happens to Good Samaritans, watched them become cautionary tales. His hand is already pulling out his phone, ready to call 911 and keep walking. The smart move, the safe move. The move that keeps his alarm set for 6:30 and his dreams intact. Then, the victim screams again. Not a scream of pain, a scream of terror, the sound of someone who knows they're about to die. And something inside him breaks. He drops his bag. The papers inside scatter as it hits the concrete. Years of preparation, research on the company, printed articles about their CEO, mock interview questions with his own handwritten answers, all of it tumbling onto wet pavement. But he's already running, legs pumping, heart hammering, every logical thought in his brain screaming at him to turn around. "Stop! Get away from him! I'm filming you!" His voice cracks through the alley like a whip. His phone is up, camera light on, capturing faces. It's the only weapon he has, and he knows it. The 3 attackers snap their heads toward him, eyes wild with adrenaline and something else, something chemical. One of them still has his fist raised over the victim who's curled on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moves. The math is simple, 3 against 1. They could rush him. They could take his phone and probably his life. But the camera is rolling and he's already backing toward the street where those passing cars might actually see. Might actually call the police, might actually make them think twice. I said, get away from him. The police are coming. They're not. He hasn't called them yet. But his voice carries the kind of conviction that comes from pure terror, masquerading as courage. The attackers exchange glances, some silent communication passing between them. Then, the largest one spits on the ground next to the victim, and they scatter. Just like that, running in 3 different directions, swallowed by the shadows of buildings that have witnessed 1,000 crimes and kept every secret. He rushes to the victim, knees hitting concrete so hard he'll feel it for days. The man is older, maybe mid-50s, wearing what was once an expensive suit, now torn and soaked with blood. His face is a mess of cuts and swelling, one eye already sealed shut, but he's breathing. Shallow, ragged breaths that rattle in his chest like dice in a cup. "Sir? Sir, can you hear me? I'm calling an ambulance." The man doesn't respond. His good eyes unfocused, staring at nothing. There's a gash on his head that's bleeding too much, the kind that needs pressure now. He pulls off his jacket, the one he was planning to wear tomorrow, and presses it against the wound. His hands come away red. The man groans, tries to move, and he has to hold him still. "Don't move. Help is coming. You're going to be okay." He's not sure if that's true. He's seen enough violence to know what internal bleeding looks like, what a skull fracture sounds like when someone hits concrete. But he says it anyway, because it's what you're supposed to say. Because hope is sometimes the only medicine that works. The 911 operator is calm, almost bored, asking questions he barely hears. His eyes are locked on his phone screen where the time glows like an accusation. 9:57. Every minute that passes is a minute of sleep he won't get. Every second is his dream slipping further away. The operator is explaining that the nearest ambulance is at another scene, that it could be 40 minutes, maybe more, that if he has transportation, he should consider taking the victim himself. 40 minutes. This man could be dead in 40 minutes. He looks at his car parked half a block away, a 15-year-old sedan that barely passed inspection last month. The back seat still has fast food wrappers from this morning's breakfast because he couldn't afford to stop for real food. If he loads this bleeding stranger into that car, if he drives him to county hospital across town, he's looking at hours. The hospital will want information, insurance, emergency contacts. They'll want him to stay, to give a statement, to be a witness. He knows this dance. His cousin got jumped 3 years ago, and the Good Samaritan who helped him ended up trapped at the hospital until 4 in the morning dealing with police and paperwork. 4 in the morning, 6 hours from now, 4 hours before he needs to be awake. No time to prepare, no time to rest, no time to be anything other than exhausted and unprepared for the most important 9 o'clock of his life. The man coughs blood onto his shirt, the good shirt, the only interview shirt he owns. He makes the decision before his brain can overrule his heart, scoops the man up in a fireman's carry, grunting under the weight, and staggers toward his car. The messenger bag lies forgotten on the sidewalk, papers turning to pulp in a puddle. Everything he prepared, every advantage he'd carved out, left behind like it never mattered. The drive to county hospital is a blur of red lights he runs and prayers he doesn't remember saying. The man in his back seat moans occasionally, a sound that at least means he's alive. The dashboard clock seems to be moving faster than the car. 10:15, 10:30, 10:45. Each passing minute is a nail in the coffin of his tomorrow. The emergency room is chaos. A Saturday night in the city means gunshot wounds and overdoses and car accidents all competing for attention. The triage nurse looks at him with eyes that have seen everything and been impressed by nothing. She needs information, insurance card, ID, emergency contact. The man has a wallet, but it's empty except for a blood-soaked business card too damaged to read. No phone, no medical bracelet, nothing. Is he family? She asks, already knowing the answer. No, I just found him. He was being attacked. Then you'll need to stay until we can locate his family or next of kin. Could be an hour, could be longer. Her voice carries the weight of someone who's had this conversation 1,000 times. How much longer? She shrugs. We found his medical alert information, but the system is down. Could be 3 hours, could be morning. You're welcome to leave, but if something happens and we can't reach anyone. She doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. If he leaves, this man might die alone in a hallway, another nameless body, another tragedy that gets filed away and forgotten. And he'll spend the rest of his life wondering if 5 more minutes would have made the difference. He looks at the clock on the wall. 11:03. I'll stay. The waiting room becomes his prison. Orange plastic chairs bolted to the floor, fluorescent lights that hum with a frequency designed to prevent sleep, a television in the corner playing news no one watches. He tries to clean the blood off his shirt in the bathroom, but it's set in deep, turned the white fabric brown. The shirt is ruined. His interview outfit is destroyed. His notes are dissolving in an alley somewhere, and the clock keeps moving. Midnight becomes 1. 1 becomes 2. He tries calling his mother but knows she's asleep, needs to be asleep because she works the early shift at the diner and can't afford to miss it. He types out a text instead. Something came up. Might be late tomorrow. Don't worry. He deletes the last part. She'll worry anyway. That's what mothers do. By 3 in the morning, he's running on nothing but anxiety and convenience store coffee that tastes like regret. His eyes burn. His back aches from the plastic chairs. And somewhere in this hospital, the man he saved is getting stitches and scans and care he wouldn't have survived long enough to receive if someone hadn't stopped. That should feel good. That should feel worth it. But all he can think about is the interview slipping away with each passing hour. At 6:15, a nurse finally approaches. The man is stable, conscious, asking for his wife. They've contacted his family through his medical alert system and someone is on the way. He's free to go. Free. The word is almost funny. He's not free. He's trapped in a nightmare of his own making. A nightmare born from the catastrophic decision to be a good person at the worst possible time. He drives home in a daze. The sun is rising, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that mock him with their beauty. His alarm was supposed to go off in 15 minutes. He was supposed to wake up refreshed, confident, ready. Instead, he's running on no sleep, wearing a blood-stained shirt, smelling like hospital disinfectant and failure. His apartment feels like a museum of broken dreams, the suit hanging on the door, the stack of index cards with practice answers, the bottle of cologne he was saving for special occasions, all of it useless now. He calls the company at 8:30, hands shaking so badly he can barely hold the phone. The receptionist's voice is crisp, professional, and completely uninterested in his emergency. Mr. Lawson doesn't do reschedules. If he's not there by 9, he forfeits the opportunity. Policy is policy. She suggests he try again next year when they're hiring. Maybe? He tries to explain. A man was dying, a robbery, the hospital. But she's already talking over him, already moving to the next call on her list because, to her, he's just another name that didn't work out, another file to close, another seat to fill with someone who wanted it more, someone who would have kept walking. The interview happens without him. 9 o'clock comes and goes. His phone buzzes with an automated email. Application withdrawn. Thank you for your interest. And just like that, years of dreaming, months of preparing, weeks of hoping, all of it evaporates because he made a choice in an alley that most people wouldn't have made, because he stopped when everyone else kept moving. His mother calls at 10. He doesn't answer. What would he even say? That he threw away their future for a stranger? That the one shot they had at breaking the cycle is gone because he couldn't ignore a scream in the dark? The man he saved is somewhere in a hospital room, alive, recovering, surrounded by family he'll never meet, and he's sitting in his apartment, staring at a rejection email, wondering if doing the right thing was the biggest mistake of his life. But what he doesn't know, what he can't possibly know as he sits there in his ruined shirt with blood still under his fingernails, is that the man he saved isn't just some random victim. The man he sacrificed everything for owns the very company that just rejected him. And in exactly 1 month, he'll get an email that will make him question everything he thought he knew about luck, fate, and the universe's sense of timing. The question is, when opportunity knocks again, will it be a second chance or a final cruel joke? They say no good deed goes unpunished. But what they don't tell you is how the punishment slowly devours you, piece by piece, until you're not even sure who you are anymore. 3 days pass like decades. The apartment feels smaller somehow, like the walls are closing in with each rejection email, each unanswered application, each reminder of what he threw away in that alley. The blood-stained shirt sits in his trash can, half buried under takeout containers he can't afford, but bought anyway. Because when your life is falling apart, sometimes a $5 burger is the only thing that makes sense. He keeps telling himself he did the right thing. Keeps replaying that moment when he had to choose between his future and a stranger's life. But righteousness doesn't pay rent, morality doesn't answer to bill collectors, and character doesn't explain to your mother why the dream she's been investing in for 25 years just evaporated in a single night. His phone rings at 2 in the afternoon on the 4th day. Unknown number. He almost doesn't answer because unknown numbers mean debt collectors, and he's not ready for that conversation. But something makes him pick up, maybe desperation, maybe hope, maybe just the need to hear another human voice that isn't his own thoughts screaming at him. The voice on the other end is professional, cold, efficient. Human resources from a logistics company 40 miles outside the city. They have an opening for a warehouse supervisor, night shift, 11 to 7. The pay is barely above minimum wage, less than half what the position at the tech company would have offered. But it's something. It's survival. And right now, survival is the only game he's playing. He takes the interview, takes the job, takes the night shift that turns his entire life nocturnal and hollow. Because what choice does he have? The eviction notice on his door isn't going to pay itself. His mother's worried calls aren't going to stop until he can tell her he's working. And the hole inside him where his future used to be isn't going to fill itself with wishes and regret. The warehouse is exactly what you'd expect. Concrete floors that echo with every footstep, fluorescent lights that flicker at random intervals like they're powered by broken promises, the smell of cardboard and diesel fuel, and the sweat of people who've also had their dreams crushed by circumstance. His co-workers are ghosts moving through their shifts, eyes dead, conversation limited to the absolute minimum required for the job. Nobody asks about his story, nobody shares theirs. They're all just surviving, getting through the hours until they can go home and pretend their lives are something other than this. But here's what keeps him awake during the day when he's supposed to be sleeping. Here's what gnaws at him while he's stacking boxes and scanning barcodes and watching his life become a statistic. He can't stop wondering about the man he saved, can't stop seeing that blood-soaked suit, can't stop hearing those ragged breaths. The hospital never called back. He never got a name, never got closure, just saved a life and walked away into his own personal nightmare. And for all he knows, that stranger went back to his perfect existence without a second thought about the nobody who threw away everything to pull him out of death's waiting room. 2 weeks into the warehouse job, his supervisor pulls him aside. There's been a complaint. He's been distracted, missing scans, stacking pallets incorrectly. The kind of mistakes that get people fired in places where workers are disposable, and desperation is the primary qualification. He apologizes, promises to do better, and spends the rest of his shift moving like a robot, thoughts completely blank because thinking is what gets him in trouble. Thinking leads to questions like, what if I had kept walking? And those questions lead to spirals he can't afford to enter. His mother visits on a Sunday. She brings food he doesn't have the appetite to eat and optimism he doesn't have the heart to crush. She talks about her church group, about the prayers they're saying for him, about how God has a plan even when we can't see it. He nods and smiles and says all the right things while dying inside, because how do you tell your mother that you're not sure God was paying attention the night you made the biggest mistake of your life? How do you explain that her son, the one she bragged about to her friends, the one who was finally going to make something of himself, is now just another night shift worker with no prospects and no future? She leaves behind a plate of food and a Bible verse written on a sticky note, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. He stares at it for a long time after she's gone, trying to find comfort in the words, trying to believe that this nightmare is part of some bigger plan. But all he feels is anger. Anger at the universe, anger at himself, anger at the three men who put him in this position, anger at the stranger whose life apparently mattered more than his own. 3 weeks after that night in the alley, something impossible happens. The email arrives at 7 in the morning, right as he's getting home from his shift, too tired to think, too numb to feel anything but the ache in his feet and the emptiness in his chest. The subject line makes him stop breathing. Second interview opportunity, Meridian Technologies. His finger hovers over the delete button because this has to be spam, has to be some cruel algorithm that doesn't know his application was withdrawn, has to be the universe's idea of a joke. But he opens it anyway because even drowning men grab at shadows if they look enough like rope. The email is real. Verified sender. Official company letterhead. They're reaching out to candidates who were unable to attend their original scheduled interviews due to extenuating circumstances. A spot is opened. They're offering him a second chance. The interview is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Same time, same position, same opportunity he thought was gone forever. He reads it 5 times, 10 times. Looks for the catch, the fine print, the indication that this is some kind of mistake. But it's there in black and white, offering him back the future he'd mourned as dead and buried. And for the first time in 21 days, he feels something other than despair. He feels hope. Dangerous, fragile, terrifying hope that makes his hands shake and his eyes burn and his chest tighten with something between joy and panic. But here's what the email doesn't say. Here's what he can't possibly know as he sits there in his warehouse uniform, staring at a second chance he doesn't deserve. This isn't a scheduling error. This isn't random. Someone made a call. Someone with power and influence reached into the machine of corporate bureaucracy and pulled his name back from the rejected pile. The man he saved, now recovered, now back in his office, now aware of exactly who gave up everything to save his life, has been watching, investigating, checking to see if the character he witnessed that night was real or just a moment of impulse. And what he found convinced him that some people deserve second chances even when the system says otherwise. But none of this matters if he can't show up prepared, can't show up ready, can't show up as anything other than the exhausted, broken shell of who he used to be. 3 weeks. He has 3 weeks to transform back into someone worth hiring, 3 weeks to remember what ambition feels like, 3 weeks to convince himself that he deserves this after what he sacrificed. The warehouse manager doesn't take the resignation well. They're understaffed. They needed someone reliable. He's leaving them in a bad position, but he doesn't care anymore. Can't care, because for the first time since that night, he has something worth fighting for. He quits on the spot, walks out into morning sunlight that feels like forgiveness, and goes home to sleep for the first time in weeks without nightmares about blood and broken dreams. The preparation is different this time, more intense, more desperate. He can't just review the company information, he needs to consume it. Can't just practice answers, he needs to perfect them. This isn't just an interview anymore. It's resurrection. It's proof that the sacrifice wasn't meaningless. It's validation that doing the right thing doesn't always destroy you. He maxes out the credit card he's been avoiding to buy a new suit. Spends hours he should be sleeping in the library researching, preparing, transforming himself back into someone who belongs in that building. His mother cries when he tells her. Happy tears this time, tears that taste like vindication and answered prayers. She tells everyone at church, tells the neighbors, tells anyone who will listen that her son is getting his second chance, that God came through like she knew he would. And he lets her believe it because maybe she's right. Maybe there is some cosmic justice at work. Maybe the universe does occasionally reward the good, even when they're drowning in consequences. The 3 weeks pass in a blur of preparation and anxiety and hope that refuses to be crushed no matter how many times his mind tries to kill it with doubt. He practices his handshake in the mirror, researches the interview panel, memorizes mission statements and company values. He becomes obsessed with not just succeeding, but excelling, because anything less than perfection feels like dishonoring the sacrifice he made, like proving that saving that stranger was the wrong choice after all. The night before the interview, he can't sleep. Lies in bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios, imagining questions, preparing for every possible outcome. What if they ask why he missed the first interview? Does he tell the truth? Does he explain about the stranger and the blood in the hospital? Or does he lie and say it was a family emergency, something that sounds better, something that doesn't make him sound like someone who makes catastrophic decisions when it matters most? He decides on the truth, because if they're going to reject him, it should be for who he actually is, not some polished version he manufactures to fit their expectations. And if they can't respect someone who stopped to save a life, then maybe it's not the kind of company he wants to work for anyway. The rationalization helps him sleep for a few hours, though his dreams are filled with alleys and blood and strangers who turn into judges. Morning comes too fast and too slow. He puts on the new suit that cost 3 months of warehouse wages, knots the tie with hands that almost remember how to stop shaking, looks in the mirror and sees someone who looks like they belong in that building, even if they don't feel like it. The drive across the city is torture. Every red light feels personal. Every minute in traffic feels like the universe testing his commitment one last time. He arrives 30 minutes early, because being late isn't an option when you're living on borrowed grace. The building is exactly as he remembered, glass and steel and money. The lobby gleams with the kind of cleanliness that costs more than most people make in a month. Everyone moving through it looks important, purposeful, like they know exactly where they belong in the grand scheme of things. He checks in with reception, gets his visitor badge, and takes a seat in the waiting area where his entire future will be decided in the next hour. But what he doesn't see is the camera in the corner recording his arrival. doesn't know that upstairs, in an office with a view that costs more than his yearly salary, someone is watching the monitor with an intensity that borders on obsession. The man he saved, now fully healed, wearing a suit that costs more than the car he drove him to the hospital in, studying every movement, every gesture, looking for confirmation that the character he witnessed that night wasn't a fluke, looking for proof that some people really are worth saving, worth believing in, worth building a future around. The receptionist calls his name. It's time. He stands, adjusts his tie one last time, and walks toward the conference room where his second chance is waiting. His heart is hammering so hard he can feel it in his throat. His palms are sweating despite the building's perfect climate control. And somewhere in his mind, a question keeps repeating like a prayer or a curse. What if this is just another test I'm about to fail? He reaches for the door handle, takes a breath, and steps into a room where the man sitting across the table isn't the friendly HR representative he was expecting. It's someone else. Someone whose face is twisted with contempt before he even sits down. Someone who looks at him like he's already decided this is a waste of time. And in that moment, as their eyes meet, he realizes something terrifying. His second chance might actually be worse than having no chance at all. Because the man staring at him with barely concealed disgust has clearly already made up his mind, and nothing he says in the next hour is going to change it. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately known you were about to be destroyed? The conference room is cold, not temperature cold, but the kind of cold that comes from a person who's already decided you're worthless before you've said a single word. The man sitting across the table is in his early 50s, expensive suit, wedding ring that probably costs more than 3 months of warehouse wages, and eyes that look at him like he's something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. His nameplate reads Lawson, Director of Talent Acquisition, the gatekeeper, the executioner, and from the way he's leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, jaw tight, it's clear this interview is a formality before the inevitable rejection. Sit down. The words aren't an invitation, they're a command. He sits, tries to maintain the confidence he practiced in the mirror for 3 weeks. But confidence is hard to hold when someone is looking at you like you've already wasted their time. Lawson doesn't open with the standard interview pleasantries, doesn't ask about his drive-in or comment on the weather, just flips open a thin folder and stares at it like it contains evidence of war crimes. So, you're the no-show. The words hang in the air like an accusation, not the candidate who had to reschedule, not the applicant with extenuating circumstances, the no-show. Like those 2 words define everything about who he is and everything he'll ever be. He feels his prepared answers evaporating, his carefully constructed explanations crumbling. Because how do you defend yourself to someone who's already convicted you? Sir, I can explain what happened that night. He tries to keep his voice steady, professional, but there's a tremor in it that sounds like desperation. Lawson holds up a hand, cutting him off before he can continue. Please don't. I don't care about excuses. The contempt is so thick you could choke on it. Do you know how many applications we received for this position? Thousands of people who would have crawled through broken glass to be here. And you couldn't even show up on time. I was helping someone who was dying. The words come out harder than he intended, more defensive. But how else is he supposed to respond when someone is treating his sacrifice like a character flaw? Lawson's expression doesn't change. Not even a flicker of curiosity, not even a moment of consideration. Just that same cold assessment that says nothing he could possibly say matters. And that's supposed to make us bend our rules? That's supposed to make you special? The mockery in his voice is surgical, designed to cut deep. We need people who prioritize this company, people who understand that opportunities don't wait for heroes, people who know the difference between responsibility and stupidity. He leans forward now, and there's something almost personal in his disdain. You made your choice that night. You chose some stranger over your future. That's your problem, not ours. The room is silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the sound of his dreams dying for the second time. He spent 3 weeks preparing for this, 3 weeks rebuilding hope, 3 weeks convincing himself that the sacrifice was worth it because the universe rewards good people. And here he is, being lectured by someone who wouldn't have stopped, who would have kept walking, who's never had to choose between his conscience and his survival. The anger starts somewhere deep in his chest, burning through the desperation and the need to please. Because maybe Lawson is right. Maybe he did make the wrong choice. But if being the kind of person who gets hired means being the kind of person who walks past dying strangers, then maybe he doesn't want this job after all. He stands up. The chair scrapes against the floor with a sound like finality. Lawson looks surprised for the first time since he walked in. "What are you doing?" There's confusion in his voice now, maybe even a hint of satisfaction that he's proven his point about this candidate being unprofessional. But he doesn't care anymore. Doesn't care about the opinion of someone who's never had to make an impossible choice. Doesn't care about fitting into a company culture that values punctuality over humanity. "You're right. It was my problem." The words come out calm now, dignified in a way that surprises even him. "And I'd do it again. Every single time. Because that's who I am. And if that's not who you want working here, then I'm in the wrong place." He picks up his folder, the one with his carefully prepared materials, and turns toward the door. His hand is on the handle when the voice comes from behind him. "Daniel?" He freezes. That voice. He knows that voice. Heard it whispering through pain in the back of his car. Heard it gasping for air on the way to the hospital. Heard it in his nightmares every night since. But it can't be. It's impossible. He turns slowly, afraid that moving too fast will shatter whatever hallucination his desperate mind has created. And there, standing in a doorway he didn't even know was there, is the man from the alley. But he's different now. Clean. Healed. Wearing a suit that costs more than every piece of clothing he's ever owned combined. Surrounded by an aura of power that makes the air in the room feel different. And he's looking at him with an expression that's equal parts gratitude and something else. Something calculating. Something that looks like a test that's finally been passed. You. It's all he can manage. The world has tilted sideways. Reality has become negotiable. Because the stranger whose life he saved, the man he sacrificed everything for, is standing in the offices of Meridian Technologies like he owns the place. And from the way Lawson has gone pale, from the way everyone in the room has suddenly stood straighter, maybe he does. The man walks toward him with the careful movements of someone who's recently been reminded of their mortality. "You saved my life." It's not a question. It's a statement of fact delivered with the weight of someone who understands exactly what that means. Do you remember that night? The alley? The hospital? He nods, unable to form words because his brain is still trying to process how the victim and this building and his second chance are all somehow connected in ways that seem cosmically impossible. "Sir, I didn't know he was..." Lawson starts to speak, voice suddenly stripped of all its earlier contempt, replaced with something that sounds like panic. But the man holds up a hand, the same gesture Lawson used to silence him earlier, and the director of talent acquisition shuts his mouth so fast his teeth click. "Daniel, my name is Richard Meridian. I'm the founder and CEO of this company." The words land like bombs. The stranger is Richard Meridian, the man whose name is on the building, the billionaire whose company he's been dreaming of working for, the person whose life he saved without knowing he was saving his own future in the process. And I've been looking for you. I had my security team track down the Good Samaritan from that night, had them investigate you, learn about you, see if the man who saved me in the dark is the same man who shows up when the lights are on. The room is spinning. None of this makes sense. Why would a billionaire need to be rescued in an alley? Why would someone with security teams and drivers be vulnerable to street thugs? But those questions evaporate when Richard speaks again, his voice carrying the authority of someone who's used to being heard and obeyed. "I gave you this second interview to see what you'd do, to see if you'd come back, if you'd try, if you'd show the same character when you had something to lose. And then I had Lawson test you, push you, insult you, to see if you'd compromise who you are to get what you want. Lawson looks like he's been punched. This was a test? This was planned? But Richard isn't looking at him anymore. His focus is entirely on the young man who chose a stranger's life over his own dreams. You passed. Not just passed, you walked away. You chose dignity over desperation. And that's exactly the kind of person I need building the future of this company. He extends his hand, and there's something in the gesture that transcends a simple handshake. It's an offering, a partnership, a recognition of character that can't be taught or trained or manufactured. I'm not offering you the position you applied for. Richard's words make his heart sink for a moment until he continues. I'm offering you something better, Vice President of Community Impact, a new division I'm creating. We're going to find more people like you, people who do the right thing when no one's watching, people who understand that success without character is just wealth without worth. The salary is 3 times what you applied for. The impact is immeasurable. The question is, are you ready? He looks at this man who was dying in his backseat a month ago, now offering him not just a job, but a purpose. Looks at Lawson, who's been fired with a single glance from Richard, looks at the life he's been living and the life being offered, and realizes that the sacrifice wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning. Was the universe testing him that night? Or was he testing himself? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the only thing that matters is that when the moment came, when the choice was his to make, he chose the kind of person he wanted to be over the kind of person the world told him he needed to be. And somehow, impossibly, that choice led him here. Yes. The word comes out strong, certain, real. I'm ready. Richard smiles, and it's the smile of someone who's found exactly what they were looking for. Welcome to Meridian Technologies. Let's change some lives. And just like that, the night that destroyed his future becomes the night that created it. The sacrifice that cost him everything becomes the investment that paid dividends he never could have imagined. The stranger he saved becomes the mentor who saves him right back. Because that's how the universe works when you're willing to lose everything to do what's right. It doesn't always reward you, but sometimes, just sometimes, it rewards you in ways you never saw coming. So here's my question for you. Because this isn't just his story, it's a mirror. When your moment comes, when you have to choose between your comfort and someone else's crisis, between your convenience and someone else's survival, between what's easy and what's right, what will you choose? Drop your answer in the comments below. Tell me about a time you stopped when everyone else kept walking. Tell me about a sacrifice you made that seemed like the end but became the beginning. Because maybe your story isn't over yet. Maybe your alley is still ahead. And maybe knowing that character counts when it costs something will change how you see the next stranger who needs help. Hit that subscribe button if you believe that doing the right thing isn't foolish, it's foundational. And remember, the difference between a mistake and a miracle is often just a matter of time and perspective. I'll see you in the next story.